And then in verse 15, for that which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that I do not. But what I hate, that do I. Does that sound like bondage? It's a bondage of corruption. Just as he described in the first few verses of just before Romans 8:23 about the creation. In verse 16, if then I do that what I would not, I consent under the law that it is good. Now then, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwells in me. So now, see, Paul is representing himself as being bound with an unwelcome prisoner, being the old man. This is what makes for the groaning. Paul wasn't complaining. Paul wasn't murmuring like the ancient Israel in the wilderness, because Paul could detail the source of his groaning. It's not an unintelligent. It's not unintelligent and being just discontent with the present circumstances. No, Paul could tell you why he was groaning. It's because when I would to do good, then I find then another law in my members. And he could tell you what he was hoping for to be delivered for the redemption of the body. It was an intelligent groaning. Romans 7:24, there at the conclusion, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Paul knew that this wasn't an eternal, a permanent arrangement. He knew that this groaning was directly attributable to the body. Who shall deliver me from this body of death? Paul knew that when the body ends, he's done with the groaning. He knew that.
Amen.
The groaning is not the end of the matter. Groaning and waiting are simultaneous experiences.
Amen.
We will only be groaning as long as we are waiting. And we're only waiting because we're groaning. We're waiting for the adoption, for the redemption of the body. It's like we are children of God. We've been born of Him. We've been adopted, but the full transaction hasn't been completed yet. All the paperwork is still in the making, so to speak, to make the transaction final, and so there won't be any more going out. But we're waiting, we're looking, we're expecting, we're longing, we're desiring, we're wanting. 1 Corinthians 15 talks about this. It said it's sown in dishonor, but it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. That's this body of death. And it is raised in power. That's the new body. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. So our waiting is not wondering. We're not waiting for just something to change. Our waiting is not ambiguous. We're not just waiting for something to get something's going to break through and something's going to get better. No, our waiting is, again, an intelligent waiting, because the Lord's revealed to us what He has promised. We are confident, therefore, I say, Paul said it in 2 Corinthians 5, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord.
Amen.
Here's where we find the purpose for the groaning, is that it makes you willing to be absent from the body. That's why the Holy Spirit doesn't want you to be at ease in this world. Because He's saving us for another world. He's making us strangers in this world. So I find it very rational, very perfectly reasonable that the present ministry of the Holy Spirit is separating you from at-homeness in this body.
That's right.
So the present groaning is a weaning process.
Amen.
I like this, the old word, the old form of this word. It's the maturation process, becoming full grown. So if we want to get to this point where Paul's expression here in 2 Corinthians 5 is ours too. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body. To be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. See, our bodies are the biggest item of undone business. You've been given a new heart, been given a new song. You've been given all kinds of newness, new life, newness of life, walk in newness of life by a new covenant. He's given us a new spirit, but we still have the old body. It's still undone business. That's what we're waiting for. 1 Corinthians 15, 51 through 52 says, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trump shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality." It has to. It must. I remember it's been several years ago now, but Brother Bob, this really came home to Brother Bob, and he says, it must. This must put on incorruption. It has to, because you and I were not created for corruption. You and I were not created for mortality. We're created in the image of God. And immortality is a departure from the nature of God, from the creation of God. God being eternal He doesn't create things that deteriorate. He doesn't create things that die. It dies because sin entered in, and death through sin. That's why it's dying. So this mortality must put on mortality. It has to, because God created it. The groaning that we experience now is the immortality that's working in you now. The immortality is in there working in a mortal frame. The incorruption is in there dwelling in a corruptible frame. Incorruption it doesn't get along with corruption. They're going opposite ways. Mortality doesn't agree with immortality, so it makes for groaning. Well, one reason that this truth about the Holy Spirit is not so commonly heard is because it can't be marketed. Yeah. This truth about the Holy Spirit is not something that sells. Amen. Just think about how absurd it is that you overhear people talking. One person is envious of their neighbor because their neighbor groans more than they do. For one person to be envious of another person in the church because their groaning is so much deeper than my groaning. I'm envious of them. You see how that doesn't sell? Covetousness sells.
That's right.
The working of the Holy Spirit can't be marketed. It's His work. But the groaning of the Holy Spirit has a work that it's doing in us now. A profitable work. And the waiting of the Holy Spirit, that He's put us in the awaiting posture. Because He started the work, but He's not finishing it. So He's putting us in a waiting posture. Both the groaning and the waiting have a purging and perfecting work in each of us. So the work of the Holy Spirit is, strangely enough, it makes you content to be discontent. That's kind of my own way of saying we ourselves groan within ourselves. Because he's made it uncomfortable for us now. So we groan. But because of what He's promised, He's made us content to be discontent. So the Lord blessed me with these things, and I pray He blessed you with them also.